Well, I'll start sharing the slides. I can do at least that much.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you have the slides, so. Excuse me.
This is an awfully quiet meeting.
Yeah, sorry, are you gonna kick it off, or guess we can? I think the next slide's the agenda, is that correct?
It's just Gary's basic reminder.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to monitor the chat at least.
Yeah, I popped it open on another window, on another screen, so I can see it as well.
And as we heard in the prelims, some of you need to remember to go on mute. Would be a good thing. So sorry, I really don't have a clue how Gary wanted to elaborate on these. You can all read his points.
Is anybody sent Gary Green a note? I was in a meeting the other day and the guy who set up the meeting was in there by himself. And somebody sent him an email and got him squared away.
Let me send Gary a quick email.
Jamie, Gary Jensen here. On the long-term goals, can I address item 3 or at least talk about it just briefly?
Yeah, go ahead, Gary. If you got something to add, absolutely.
I've been reviewing quite a few applications lately, and when Patriot records are showing up with new applications that have been transcribed, I'm finding that the records have all the information in there except they have not updated the children. And I'm finding children of all the other children in there except for the one that's on the application that I'm looking at. So I would encourage people to double check.
I'm up.
Gary Green's coming on.
I would just encourage everybody to double check when they're updating records and Patriot records to be sure that the child is added along with the correct spouse. Thank you.
So Gary, you want to go back to the start or you want to skip from here? Your call, Mr. Green.
Yes, I'm catching up. I apologize, folks. How far are you, Jamie?
We're just on slide 3, Gary.
Your goals, short and long term.
I'm not seeing the slides. Where are they?
You're not seeing the slides. Well, that's interesting. Is no one else seeing the slides?
I see the slides.
I see I got them up.
I see the slides.
I can see.
I see the slides.
I can see the slides. No problem.
I see them.
Okay, I apologize to everybody for was helping wife out with dishes and my honeydews got ahead of me. So let me thank you all for participating. Thank everybody for what we have done so far. This is an amazing activity that has occurred in the last 4 years, starting with Eric building the program, Jamie critiquing it until we got it under control, and then bringing in the volunteers across the nation. So I appreciate everybody helping out. Our short-term goals that I see for the next year, we need to try to complete the transcriptions of the older records. From my data, that means we've got about 7,000 records that we need to transcribed to catch up where everybody is just doing maintenance. We need to make sure we have people in each society who are going to be responsible for transcribing that society. And I think I need to update the reviewers to make sure we're covered across the nation. So if you're interested in being a reviewer, let me know. What that means is you look at somebody else's work and you say, I agree with it, I don't agree with it, needs to go back or whatever, and then, or you publish it. Long-term goals, I see that we need to start assessing the database. We've got a database that included data from Grave Registry, from the Patriot Index from way back, and some other spurious data that seems to be in there we haven't really looked at because we haven't had an application assigned to it. So we've got to go back through those. Jamie, I think, is going to go through a little bit on the cemetery GPS coordinates, but we do have some problems where the coordinates for the GPS of the grave are greater than 2 miles from the cemetery. Which one's wrong? We don't know. That's going to take a hand massage to work that. So we're needing volunteers to do that. We do have probably 1,500 or so patriots that have applications and no children assigned to them, which means the Patriot record was never updated when the application was added. So we need to go back through those. And we're going to be looking at duplicate entries of patriots all the time. So if you see them, you need to identify them and pass them on to Ray Lazaro to get us going. Next slide, Jamie. Okay, one of the goals that I have is to see if we can find somebody who's willing to write the story from their point of view about the success of the Patriot Research System. I've written it a couple times, but my voice isn't carrying very well for the SAR magazine. So I need someone who thinks they can write and can tell their story from why they participated and what's going on and what they're proud of. So if you see that as something you could do, please volunteer. This is a snapshot on the 8th of May of our most critical societies. And when I say critical, in the sense that numbers of applications still to be transcribed. This is before Eric was able to start doing the catch up and bringing in the records from 2021, 2022 into the database. So you won't see these numbers necessarily any place. It's just shows you where the emphasis is. I want to thank everybody who jumped in to help with Florida. That really brought theirs down. And this weekend, Florida was thanking me for help because they've got some folks working there, but they were a little overwhelmed with their size of society, and everybody jumping in really helped out. California has been doing a super job. They're down to 227 of the older transcriptions accomplished. New York has been pounding away. There's a strong bunch in there that's just been doing it. Tennessee has a couple of volunteers along the way. Pennsylvania has been working hard. Kansas needs some work. We've got a couple guys working in there. Virginia's, Florida and Georgia are all lumped into, they've got a lot of applications. They need some folks working on it. So best way I can describe it is we've got a goal to finish this, in my mind, by next June. The way things have been going, we'll probably finish earlier than that. I do need someone to volunteer to be a publisher of biographies, looking for plagiarism and updating with grammar. We get good biographies, so they just need to have somebody who will take it on and saying, I'm going to look at it and maintain a standard. So if that's something you could see yourself doing, I appreciate you letting me know. This is a reiteration of the goal is to fix the coordinates for our graves more than 2 miles away. We actually have a chart, or not a chart, but a way of identifying those, and they're on the PRS on the right-hand side for those of you who are reviewers. And we also need to periodically check for cemeteries that have graves that have the exact same coordinates. It should not be that often. There might be one-man cemeteries, that's true, but most cemeteries have more than one person, so we're hoping to either eliminate the GPS coordinates for the Patriot or confirm that it is accurate and maybe get a different coordinate for the entrance to the cemetery. Next slide. Okay, Eric has a couple areas that he's going to pass on to you. And then we're going to let Jamie work some magic and give you some word by word or slide by slide activities. So Eric, if you're ready to go, please press it on.
Sure, I can do that. I'm going to share a couple of screens, Jamie, so I'll see if I can blow yours away. Thanks. Just because it's easier. So there's a lot of things that go on in the background, and I think you guys know for the most part, I tend to spend my time on the background of the system, and Jamie and Ray and Gary, spend the predominant time on the front side of the system, looking at the data, working with you guys, coordinating and so forth. So one of the things that I do in one of my other roles is I sit on the IT project committee and subcommittee that meets every week with our vendors at headquarters. So, that committee is, Mike Scroggins, who of course, director of operation, Mick Bitzer is the IT director, Jonathan Toon, the registrar, at the society, as well as PG Tolme, Don Shaw, and the vendor, and we're working through the membership database, and the migration of that to the current members started at Oregon. If you didn't notice, the member info system went away on Friday, just as a heads up. So if you haven't been to the membership system lately, if you go to the old one, it's going to redirect you to the new one. One of the benefits of this for us, specifically, is before this migration, I would have to go ask Mike for information about our new membership. I'd go there about once a month. I'd ask Mike, hey, can you give me some data? He'd give me information on the new chapters. He'd give me information on the new members, and then he'd give me the information on the applications that those members had submitted, both new memberships and supplementals. So you would see that that once a month, every 6 weeks, there'd be a load of data. Because of the new system, I get data every night. I no longer have to ask Mike and the staff at headquarters. I can self-serve. So what you see, an example on this page, is the fact that I can see the chapter entries, I can see the updates to the membership, and I'm seeing everything, whether they change their state member numbers, their state chapters, and then I get the applications. So it's just a matter of a click of a button, and each block of that is pulled into the PRS. So the new membership records tend to come out Thursday and Friday as they publish on their weekly, workflow from genealogy. But this is a massive improvement over where we were, a month or so ago. So, many, many thanks to the folks at headquarters that make this possible. And I just kind of take advantage of it. Another piece where, a lot of kudos and things has to go is to you guys. These numbers here are amazing in terms of total records done. We added 1,000 records within the last week, and we're still at 99.6% connected to Patriots and over 95% overall tally. I mean, that, to me, those are phenomenal numbers when we're talking, 160,000 records, plus. So, many, many thanks, to everybody on this call and others who, continue to do that work. Gary was mentioning the graves and the grave markings. This is the report. It's found here. So it's the ones with the Patriot grave, problems. But you can see some of these. This is saying the Patriot is 341 miles from his cemetery. Obviously one of them is wrong. Here is 739 miles. 25 miles. So it's pretty easy to see. How far they are. You can click each of these records to go to the to the Patriot, to the cemetery, and and sort that out. But there's 59 of these, so it's not an exorbitant number, but these are easy easy to find and figure out. The list of records that were missing, this was almost 1,200 this time last week. We're down to 154. Jonathan Toon scanned 200 more applications for me today, and those are already loaded. So they're making a huge dent in what we had, and the focus is really in the ones in the most recent year. So everything that I uploaded today is within a year old, and many of them less so. So you can start to see the approval dates, and we've got some that they're going to have to go fix and scan, but we've made a huge dent from being almost 1,200 behind. So the data is getting here. We're seeing massive data improvements in terms of data coming in. Not only are we getting the database data, we're getting the record copy data. Mike Scroggins has a person assigned now to specifically digitize all of our record copies on a weekly basis, so that we're getting them almost immediately. And in some cases, I'm getting the record copies before I get the database entries, which is something I've never seen before. So huge kudos to the folks at headquarters that are doing that work. Scanning paper is a tedious job, to say the least. Another feature that we've added in, or really not so much added in, is we've improved it, is this descendant search. So this, of all the searches we've had, the descendant search has probably been the weekly link within the PRS. So if we use it now, we've also added birth and death dates, and those can be year ranges. But now, instead of just having a massive table of data kind of thrown at your face and leaving it to the user to sort through and figure out what does it mean, we're now just looking at, here's a Patriot, but when the application was approved, which generation matched in which member, and depending on where you click, takes you to the respective page. So if we click on the Patriot, we'll go to the Patriot page. If we click on the member, we can go to the member page. If you click in the middle, we'll go in the middle. So the navigation is a little simpler. When you get multiple people from the same Patriot, you'll see that visually, that there's two applications here. In this case, there's a lot of applications. So this is the start, of what would be tree building. And in many ways is really the beginning of another pet project that Jamie and I have been digging into, is better representation of the data. We're getting lots and lots of data in the system, thanks to you guys keying everything in. But now it's, how do we exploit the data? How do we make better use of it? One of the thoughts here is, instead of every application historically, it stands on its own. You have a member, you have a Patriot, and you've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 generations of data. Each one of them is isolated, kind of in a bubble. What would happen if we start cross-connecting those, treat it like a family tree, so to speak, and kind of see what you get? Now you could have members who didn't realize they had cousins that, oh wow, I could see a Patriot that I didn't know I had. Let me take advantage of that, and so forth. So there's some work being done, more in the thought process at this point than a development phase. But things like that are things that are are being discussed in terms of potential future improvements. So we've got that. There's clearly the need and desire to get all the Patriots associated to their respective applications. That leaves a wealth of applications in these ancestry areas that, that aren't digitized yet, and kind of that question of what do we do? We kind of scratched the surface and then we stopped, mostly because newer ones became available. But what do we do from here in terms of that? That's something, kind of on the backside of the system that we're working through. Excuse me, sorry, I'm fighting a cold. So, one question we have to figure out, as a group is, how valuable are these applications, to researching, the nice thing, it'd be nice to have them all, it'd be nice to have them all connected to Patriots and really see what we have historically. But we know that's 80 years worth of data, so that there's a lot of transcription to be done. So just wanted to give a little bit of thought and insight into, kind of places we were going, places we were thinking, and so forth. But I'll stop sharing at this point and turn it back over to Jamie and Gary, unless people
Eric,
have questions.
I believe Gary Jensen from Oklahoma may have a question.
Sure.
Eric, can you take yourself off of mute and?
Yes. Eric, my question is, when you're doing research and we pull up the Patriot, we have 10 or 15 applications. Let's just take that. But we have no idea which child those go through. Our friends at the DAR, when you pull theirs up, it shows which child it is. So then you can look at that specific application to see if it goes through the lineage line you're looking for. Is there any way to do something similar to that with our database?
The way it's structured right now, it's admittedly a little bit challenging.
So
one of the things
you had there, when it shows all the ancestors or the children,
right? So one of the challenges we have right now is we've done a fantastic job of transcribing the generational data, but I can't make the assumption without doing some serious comparisons on the fly as to which one of these people in the generational data is the Patriot. And you can't assume the Patriot's male, because we have both male and female, so that brings two. And we have a number of applications where the last generation is not the Patriot. The Patriot was a generation or two younger, and they included the parents and the grandparents of a Patriot. So one of the things that's going to happen in this generational data, that is going to happen no matter what, is this field that you guys have where the name, and that's just a single data field today, that's going to split into components. So, it'll be just like, the members, just like the Patriot, where you have, the prefix and the given name, middle name, last name, suffix. So I would expect to see those changes, in here pretty soon. And we're going to massage the data to try to get the right components into the right, field names as best we can. The other couple pieces that are going to change, or that I want to add in here, is I want an indicator across here as to which one represents the Patriot, throughout here. In 90-something% of the time, it's the male at the last generation, most of the time, but not always. And we could do some comparisons to the Patriot records to help figure this out. And then I also need a comparison when we go to generation one. Is generation one the actual applicant? Because there are a series of application forms where generation one is not the applicant, but it's actually the applicant's parents. The applicant isn't included in the generational data. And it's only a handful, compared to the huge thing. But the reason I want to get all of those in is for purposes like you're describing. If I can very quickly see the Patriot, then I know the step down one and say, here's all the children. If we're going to start looking at tree building, for example, then I need to understand where the Patriot is in this record versus the Patriot in the next application and the next application, to be able to do generational comparisons, between those. That's a pretty complex task to do. So the plan is to get there, but the plan it's clearly not there today. in the way that you would want it.
Just as
There-
a follow-up then to that, Eric, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So as a reviewer, I review a lot of applications across the board, and I make sure that the generation one is the applicant on all the stuff that we're looking at, and that the patriot and the child and the spouse are appropriate in those areas. So is there a way to just put together a list so somebody like myself or somebody else could go out and correct those that are wrong for you? I'm guessing you said it's a handful, probably less than 100 or so system-wide.
There was a point in time that, we have, and I'm sure you've done a lot of transcriptions. You see, there's a lot of different application formats, and one of the formats, and I think it was in the 70s, 80s timeframe, where generation one was the parent as opposed to the applicant. And why we did that as a society, I couldn't tell you. It's abnormal. I think it kind of stinks. Personally, I'd rather have just shifted all the generations by one and included the applicant and be done. I think Jamie's trying to chime in too. So I'll let you know.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I do, Gary. And, I cherry pick out for data to pull, and I've already pulled once. Now, I haven't done it in the last 6 months, but I did a poll, and basically I just did a comparison of my best guess on the last name, first name of that last generation in the lineage data to the actual patriot that was linked on that application. So, we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to fix the data. But it's just a continuing battle. And really what it comes down to is, so as reviewers, if you check, and as people entering, as you check, and when you find those, most of them, someone has attempted to cross out those extra ones, but not always. So just take a look, go back up to the top, just make sure that last person you're entering is actually the patriot would be a big help. But Gary, we'll continue to work on that. And if you're volunteering to do that kind of stuff, I would be more than happy to dump you lists until you scream uncle of stuff you can check. We've just got a plethora of it.
Well, Gary, you can put me on Jamie, you can put me on a list. I will gladly assist others in that process. You do have me pretty busy trying to keep up with a lot of the transcribing right now, but when I run short on something there, I would definitely jump in.
Okay, let me know.
All right, thank you.
Ultimately, what I'm trying to get to, instead of just here's a patriot and here's a child, and then it'd be an exercise to the user. And keep in mind, as we go forward in generations, that parent and child generation goes further and further back, in time. It's, for a lot of us, it's 7 and 6 or 8 and 7, at this point. But some of these applications are now 10 and 9, depending on the age of the applicant. They start to get, even knowing the child, it's still challenging to find the path. But if we can get ourselves heading toward the tree structure, we can build out something kind of like this on the fly. And instead of having to worry about, hey, it's the child, you could pretty much see the whole path. And now you'd say, well, this is the one I want, this is my guy, or this one's a better one, because you'll see 4, 5, 6 generations at one time. So that's one of the reasons, and this is kind of a poor man's version. This is just comparing some names and spellings and making some guesses. So, this isn't really something that's, publicly available. But, kind of was a thought process, I guess. But, definitely appreciate the questions and comments. Let's see, there's a question in chat about we have primary contact Ray. Oh, so the Ray we're referring to is Ray Lazaro. We can, I'll put his email in the chat for you guys in a minute, so that you have that. But he's been helping out, with the duplicates and so forth, as we find the Patriot duplicates. Any other questions here before I toss back to Jamie? and Ray's already posted where to send the duplicate information in the chat. So it's there for you guys. And I'll stop sharing and Jamie can take over.
Got it, Eric. Thanks. Okay, so, last time I did a demo with several things and I continue to. So first I want to compliment most of you. You are doing an excellent job. I really appreciate it. I've noticed a lot of improvement. That's greatly appreciated. It makes my job reviewing the Patriot records so much easier. And at any time, any of you, there's my email address. Reach out to me. If you have a question, you don't understand, something doesn't make sense, just drop me an email. Always glad to try and answer questions. So I've tried several different approaches to help those that are still struggling a little bit. And what I'm going to do tonight then is a different approach, and we'll see if this works better. Basically, what I'm going to do is run through a line by line and try and show you sort of what's expected and then provide you what's not expected there. We'll see if that resonates a little better. But first, I wanted to start with just making sure we're all focused, because I continue to get questions or people say, but wait a second, that's not approved by genealogy. Why is it there? So let's all get on the same sheet of music. What is the Patriot Research System supposed to do? And this was a knockdown drag out 5 years ago when we were bringing it up. And I've been a firm believer in, and I put the little thing on the bottom in green, that all data are good, just some data are better than other data. And obviously I stole that from somewhere else. Might have been, animals farm, but I think it applies here that we're trying to identify and honor patriots. The PRS is not a place where we prove acceptance. Okay, in other words, we're not approving lineages with it. We're just trying to offer people the opportunity to go find either their patriot or someone they're looking for. And then from that, hopefully we have enough information to point them to the places where they can find the proof. They can find those record copies. They can go out to DAR, find the material there, and then they have to do the hard work of actually doing whatever proof's required to get there. So I just want to keep us all baselined on that. In other words, we're not just using genealogy approved data in the PRS, other than one place. So the only foot stomp there is when you're doing those lineages, you take them verbatim off the approved applications. But other than that, we're not just using things that are checked by genealogy. So when you're doing an update, what are we asking you to do? We're asking you to take that record copy and pull everything you can pull off of it. And what that means is everything that's not crossed out. So it doesn't have to have that genealogy check on it for you to put it in the PRS, in the Patriot record. So you go through and you pull the names and the places and the dates and the service and the sources. And I want to foot stomp that, because as I do Patriot records and I look and go, wait a second, how can we have no sources? And I go find the record copy and there's sources there, usually on page 2, usually on the bottom of page 2. So could you please, it would be very helpful to transcribe those sources when you're putting them in. And then you go out and check the DAR GRS and you supplement what's in the Patriot record. From my perspective, the record copy should come first. That should be primary. And if there's things missing, like it's missing the birthplace, but the birthplace is in the DAR record, well, put it in there. Okay, that's what I mean by supplement. And then you go check find a grave as the last thing. And the main thing of find a grave is you're trying to find the linkage to a memorial and a burial place, cemetery. Okay, and sometimes in PRS they have grave GPS, not very often, but they almost always are going to have cemetery GPS. So we're going to ask you to pull that information in as appropriate. And then in the reference thing, some of you have gotten a little carried away. Gary last time commented that, yes, we want to put where the data comes from. Well, I think we'll clarify that. We want to put where external data comes from, not record copy data. Okay, so, and I just put a couple of little notes. These are the blurbs I would use, that this data is per find a grave, whatever it is you've put there. Like per find a grave, the burial location is unknown. Or NSDAR sites when you put the sources in. Okay, fine to do that, but you don't need to split out and say NSSAR sites and put the references in. Okay, so now let me just step through. Yeah, I think that's probably readable. So starting at the top of the form, the prefix, really the only thing we're using that for today are for the female patriots. And what's expected there is Mrs. MRS, no period, just MRS. You know, I guess you could have a Ms. Patriot who was never, or female Patriot who was never married. I personally have not run across one yet, but I suppose there is one out there. But so the standard 99% of the time would be Mrs. For names, just some of you get a little confused on when we put slashes with spaces, when we put slashes with no spaces, and you can blame this on Eric. How he does the search feature requires no spaces. Okay, so anything that's searchable, when you click that Patriot search, anything that's in there that's searchable would have a slash with no space. So what does that equate to? That means names. And when you do names in general, we don't put in quotes, brackets, parentheses. We don't do any of that. You just put, like in this case, Robert/Bob. Bob probably would have been a nickname, but the Patriot's known by either. So it's Robert/Bob, no space. Same with the last name. And usually last names, what you're going to find is the record copy will have one spelling, DR will have another spelling. You know, use a little common sense here, but you know, having 6 different spellings of a name may not be necessary or appropriate, but having 2 like this one is probably appropriate. And then by not having the space in there, it makes them searchable. For dates, the standard is day, month, year. So as you see, 01, JUN, not JUNE, 1756 is sort of what's expected. I've listed kind of the only 4 prefixes to that I would expect to see. ABT for about, and about kind of replaces circa, CA, C period, you know, all the different variations you might have of that. So ABT is kind of what's expected. And as you see, not capitalized, just small letters, ABT. BEF for before, AFT for after, and BPT for baptism or baptized. Do not expect now birth, this isn't really necessary, but don't expect TS for tombstone. Don't expect WW, WP, you know, all those other kind of markings that genealogy tends to put on the applications. Not necessary, not required, and please don't put them there. For places, the standard is city or town, space/county, space/space, state abbreviation. Still seeing people put Suffolk County, New Jersey. What I'd like to see is space/space, Sussex, space/NJ. Okay. What I put here is the one, and this is the one I guess gets people most confused. You know, Maine was part of Massachusetts until the 1823, I think. Don't quote me on the date. Somewhere in that range. And so, you know, you'll have someone who was born in Massachusetts, but it became Maine. So the standard here is this would be York County, which was York County, Massachusetts, but it's listed as York, Maine District, ME District, And that should be capital M, capital E, bad me. So, in other words, don't put someone died in Maine in 1799. It's not going to be, it's going to be Maine District, Massachusetts. I hope that makes sense. So death is the same as those. Spouses, and these were old data being pulled across. There's no reason to say this is the first spouse if it's the only spouse. So just put the name, please. You can get rid of the one in parentheses. But if you have multiple spouses, it would be appreciated if you number them. So it's paren 1, paren space, name. I always put semicolon, space, space, and then the second one. And I just put how you list when you don't know a last name or a first name. Now DAR puts X's or 2 X's. Feel free. I don't really care one way or the other. I just think it looks cleaner with the dashes. And then children.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Someone got a question? Okay, you can ask me later then. For children, if you know their relationship to the spouse, you can put it in using the same nomenclature. With juniors, we don't put the commas, we don't put periods. With middle names, we don't put periods, just semicolons and spaces, please. So service, really predominantly, there's only going to be 3. There's going to be their rank spelled out. So it's not PVT, it's private, space / and then either patriotic service or civil service, and signer of the Declaration of Independence would be the 4th one that would nominally be expected. There aren't a whole lot of those. You put the explanations of those, like what the patriotic service is, what the civil service is, down in the description below. States are just the abbreviations with slashes, no space. We would ask, pretty please, that when you put in a DAR number, you do 2 things. One is you don't hand jam it in, you copy it. When you hand jam it, you make mistakes much more regularly than copying. And you push the green button and check it. And if you get that, this is a duplicate. If you don't know what to do with that at that point, you stop and it's fine. You can send me an email if you want. In other words, what it says is some other Patriot already has that link to that DAR GRS record, okay? And we really don't need 2 of them. It means we have a duplicate or someone's made an error. It just needs to be resolved. That's all. And then under service, most of you, I think, have figured out how to use the auto numbering and auto bulleting. Service and sources are numbered. All the other 3 text boxes are bulleted. If you push that button, and I guess I can draw on here. Let's see. So right here, these are the 2 buttons that you push. If you highlight the text and push the button, it will be automatically numbered for you. One needs a refresh. Do this. Happy to some other time. I'm not going to take the time here. We already talked about the external sources. So if some of these come from DAR, or if there's a note out of Find a Grave, you can reference it here. And those that tend to copy straight out of the DAR, it usually comes with the civil service or patriotic service. It's kind of a duplicate of comments. So I'd ask that you just pull them, please. Moving on to the next section, we're now down into the cemeteries. So the SAR cemetery normally is not something you'd enter. It usually comes from when you put in the second box down the Find a Grave and push the green button, it will be automatically populated for you. So if that one's not populated and you've entered the number, it means you haven't pushed the green button. Please do. The rest of the data should automatically fill out of the PRS. If it doesn't, you can submit it. Your reviewer should be able to create the cemetery for you. You don't need to worry about that part.
Jamie? Jamie,
Yes.
Ernie Sutton has his hand raised. Ernie, do you have a question, sir? Take yourself off mute, please.
Yeah, this had to do with, in terms of a patriot, we frequently, not frequently, but come across where a patriot is buried in two spots. The heart is buried, for example, in Philadelphia. The body is buried in Erie, such as Matt Anthony Wayne. We see this in a lot of Catholic soldiers where the body parts are buried in two different spots. Which one is the preferred spot?
Well, that'd be a hard one to answer on that one. In other words, what I do when I run into multiple memorials, I just document them. I will usually pick the one that would seem to be the actual burial. In other words, where the family would have, where the family's buried, usually buried with the wife, buried with children, that kind of thing. And then I will document that there's another one in the comments section. So in the comment gravesite section, that there's a second one. And if you know more about it, feel free. And if it seemed appropriate, all the way down on the bottom, and additional information. In other words, if there's a lot more information, feel free to detail as much as you can. In other words, more information is always good. Sorry, I don't know how to answer your basic question of which, in that case, which one's appropriate. I said, I just tend to, when I look at them, what's on Find a Grave, I try and pick the one that seems to be the family burial. In other words, where the person would have actually been buried, not usually what you find in memorials. Someone else has a memorial gravestone.
General Matt Anthony Wayne is just one example that
Okay.
where the body is buried one spot, his heart is buried in another spot. Many of the French patriots are buried in two locations. Body parts are buried in two locations. So I was just wondering.
Sure. Guess we got another question.
William Edlin, take yourself off mute, please.
You keep going back on mute.
Mr. Edlin, can you take yourself off mute?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, it says mute. Okay, but my question is, when you have a record copy that has a Patriot on it, of course, and you go look at the Patriot record, it's unindexed, or that's what it says. It's an unindexed Patriot record. So who actually indexes that Patriot record?
Okay, well, the unindexed means it's not connected yet. So when you pull up that application, right, and you pull up the record copy, and that's part of what you're doing when you're doing the application piece. So you start with, do we have the right ACN? If it's one with an ACN on it, does it match? Is the compatriot information correct? Now you look at okay, from the record copy, I see I've got a patriot, and it just means it's not linked at that point. So you're doing the linking. You're going and finding the patriot, or you're searching for that patriot. And when you find that patriot, you then take that patriot number, put it there, and click the button. It'll now be indexed.
Or are you referring to the text where in the ACN column, where sometimes you see ACN numbers and sometimes you see unindexed? Is that where the question stems from?
It has an ACN number. I mean, it's an approved membership. It's a supplemental. Okay. And the Patriot in the box where the Patriot number goes, there's no Patriot number.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why it's unindexed. And that's on you to go find the patriot. So if you're unclear how to do that, probably inappropriate to try and explain to you tonight how to do that, but I'd be happy to do that for you. Just drop me a line that you don't understand how to do that, and I'll help you through it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, or we could talk at the end and I could show you pretty quickly on from the stat charts that we're pointing at earlier, how that reflects into the various columns.
All right.
Okay. Okay. So down to cemetery name. If you don't find a linkage, I would ask that you put unknown in the cemetery name, because that's what it means. In other words, you have no idea what the linkage is. You didn't find it. It wasn't in the record copy. You looked in Find a Grave, it wasn't there. You're going to document that stuff down in the comments for the grave site. But in the cemetery name, you're just documenting it's unknown at this point. Find a Grave memorial ID is when you find it, you paste it in there. Again, I would ask that you don't hand jam those, please, that you copy them out of Find a Grave directly and paste them in. And now the big foot stopper, Gary mentioned it, grave GPS. I hope it's clear what grave GPS means, but if not, it means the actual burial. It doesn't mean the cemetery. It doesn't mean it's a rounded up or down of the cemetery, like some have done in the past. You either know where the Patriot's buried because you've been there, you've got the GPS, you've got a graves report. And if it's already in there, I would ask that you check it, because a good proportion of the ones that are in the PRS, especially the older ones, are really just cemetery GPS locations. And you go, Jamie, why do we care? And why we care is because something else Eric and I have worked on, and it's a feature that I think we're all really, really going to like moving forward, is the mapping. And for the mapping to work, we have to know burial GPSs. So what that means is when you pull up Google Earth, and I don't think I showed this last time, and we really don't have time to go through it tonight, but when you bring up Google Earth, you can actually go out to a county, or if you bring in multiples, a whole state, and show all the burials within the state. And as you drill down in, it'll bring up actual satellite image of the cemetery, and you can look where every Patriot's buried. Well, for that to work, you have to have grave GPS, not generic cemetery GPS, please. So I just ask you to check it, please. Please don't put cemetery GPS coordinates in there. And those are the ones that come out of either Find a Grave and or you pull up the cemetery in the PRS and look at what the coordinates are. Okay, hopefully that's clear. I went too far there. And so down to the bottom then, I guess just, I put in, if we have marked it, we would like to designate that SAR is marked it. If the date's known, that's great. This is where we're going to track markings in theory eventually. So in the comments field, so if you don't find it in Find a Grave and you have unknown in cemetery, you should have an explanation for it. A generic would be no entry found in Find a Grave. And I usually just put month, year. You could put year, you could put the date. It doesn't really matter. The goal there will be, we're going to want to cycle back to these every so often. So we'd like some indication of when the last time it was checked, please. And then some you see where in the application, it'll say he was buried in Smith's Farm. Well, that's not real helpful if Smith's Farm isn't in Find a Grave and or you don't have other details telling you where Smith's Farm is or was. So this would be more of a generic is if you don't have a link to a cemetery, don't leave Smith's Farm up in cemetery name because it's not linked. Pull it down here. And this is just how I would do it. So I didn't find it in Find a Grave, and the records show the cemetery as Smith Farm. Okay. Oh, the other one. I don't see this too often anymore. I don't know that anyone's doing it. It was something that was done in the past. People got all excited about putting in embedded links. In other words, they go out to find, usually it was Find a Grave. They go out to Find a Grave, actually link to that photo, and then embed that in here. So you would have an image of it showing up in the comment field. Well, that's not what we want to do, please. If we're going to put in gravestone photos. Let's get the photo, let's get permission for it, and then just submit it and we link to it. In other words, we have it in the PRS and then it shows up on the burial page. Okay, last little bit. So directions to gravesite. And Eric's working on something now. I think we're going to have access to the actual cemetery GPS here that'll show when you're in edit mode. But for right now, because we don't have that, I ask that if you have grave GPS and you've confirmed they're unique from the cemetery, just put this statement that says, what I do is I just type cemetery and then copy out of find a grave, GPS coordinates, plop. And that then clearly defines that they're different. If you're coming back, you're the third person opening this record, you don't have to go into find a grave to look again. You just look here and go, okay, they're different. Someone already checked it, moving right along. That's all that's there for right now. Down into sources, I think I talked about this last time, probably more than enough. Again, this is one where you see numbering. Just ask that you use the auto numbering. And if you've got the sub bullets, you can see what I did here. I guess what I'm seeing some of, again, is people are starting to label things. There's no reason to repeat sources. In other words, if you have the exact same source from the record copy as from DAR, you don't need them both. In other words, we don't need to say, well, DAR said it too. We're just looking for the source and the source of the source. So in this case, where DAR had another Pennsylvania archives, they had the 5th series. You can see what I did. I just put for that one NSDAR sites. Okay. It's just trying to make it clean and look right as we go. And then additional information is exactly what it says. The one thing we do put down there is if you check for the DAR GRS and you don't find it, that's where you would say I didn't find it, is down in additional information. And then like in this case, find a grave had some other information or unique information. We're not going to put it up in the record directly, but we'll just document it down here. Find a grave will have like links to spouses, children. You can just document that here to tell someone, hey, look, if you're looking for the whole family, it's out on Find a Grave kind of thing. And I think that's all I've got. So had a couple of questions. Got any other questions that were generated out of that?
Yeah, Jamie, Bruce Fensley from Sandhills chapter. Since I'm a new person to this particular slide is very interesting to me. It's almost like a checklist. Is that available to get a copy?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Why don't we do it this way? Send me an email. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
I assume Gary maybe will publish these slides somewhere. So obviously it's in the slides, but happy to send it to you. Sure. Anyone else? Just send me an email.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I tried to do, Bruce. That was exactly the intent of this, was to provide another way to give people information. So I hope it's helpful.
Hey, Jamie, it's Rich Surface from New Jersey.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a bunch of data to submit and I wasn't sure how to submit it. I don't submit a form to someone and they enter it. I actually just go online in the PRS system and enter it, correct?
Data from what, Rich?
Cemetery coordinates, pictures of the grave, directions to the grave cemetery. To update a Patriot Ancestor cemetery information. I have information because I went there. Now I say, what do I do with the information? Do I actually go onto his cemetery record online and enter it myself?
I'm going to think you probably don't have permission to do that. We could make that work. We don't want to make this any more intrusive than it need be.
Okay.
There's
So
the
I submit the
normal.
form.
Yeah, sure. The normal way that's done is, you go out, you do a grave marking, you submit a form.
Okay.
You know, just for a onesies. But if you've got a whole bunch, we can make it work, and we don't need to make this intrusive for you.
Okay, I'm not there yet.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree either way, whatever makes it easy. As a volunteer, you have the ability to, of course, edit Patriot records, edit cemetery records, to submit for review in publication. So, you know, it could follow that workflow too, ultimately, whatever works and is easy to get the data, and somehow or another, we'll get it in the system,
Mhm.
whether you want to key it or share it and get somebody else to key it.
Anybody else?
Jamie,
Yes.
Kermit Breed, Texas. I've pulled up some graves and they have a memorial, but there is no actual grave. What do you suggest I do with that one? I've made a decision, but I want your opinion.
Okay. Well, back to what the focus of this is. It's honoring patriots. So the memorial honors the patriot. So we're going to document it. I would say in the comments field, if you know it's a memorial and not an actual burial, you would say that. And you would just say, you know, don't know where he was buried. But, you know, and you'll find that where DAR put up a plaque in 1926 or something. It's a memorial. It's honoring those people. We will have those in the PRS. And it just says all of these people died in this county. And they've just pulled it all into one place. And where they were buried is long since disappeared. So you just write a couple of words to document that it's a memorial and not a burial, and that's fine. Is that what you were planning on doing?
No, this is find a grave. The grave is not listed as a graveyard. They've made a memorial to this patriot.
I gotcha. Sorry. So you're saying it's a memorial and find a grave with no burial information.
Correct.
Okay. Yep. So you link, so you put in the find a grave memorial number, you put unknown in cemetery, and in the comments, you put per find a grave, burial unknown.
Okay, that's what I'm doing.
Yep. Sounds good. Good choice. Anybody else?
Do you want me to show that I've got a Google Earth screen up, Jamie? Do you want me to show it quick just to
Sure. Yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
reiterate the why? Yeah. So this is why. So this is Google Earth. So we have a cemetery. You can see all sorts of headstones, you know, in here. But because we have GPS of the individual graves, we drop pins all throughout the cemetery. So now when you go to visit a cemetery, you know, this guy's over in this area, this one's over in this area, that one's up that way. But on top of that, these pins are live. So you can actually click on a pin, and if we have headstone pictures, you can actually see the headstone and information and links back to the PRS. So this is why, you know, getting the GPS coordinates is so valuable. This tool is available to our entire membership. You know, this is, you know, so you're contributing something that anybody who's a member of the SAR can you know, leverage and utilize. So it's not restricted just to, you know, to the handful of us on this call, but to the 30,000 plus members of the society as a whole. And, you know, and as this data improves, you know, the value of the tool improves, but, you know, you can zoom out, and as we zoom out, you'll find more pins and more places to go, you know, and you can, you know, that was just one county in New York, but imagine the whole, you know, Eastern Seaboard, especially, you know, is going to be covered in pins by the time we load everything out. So that would be why, you know, and that's available to everybody here. And we also create a Word document book type thing that you can, you know, generate a book for a county, print it, and take it with you if you want, you know, as a reference point. So, and both of those tools are society-wide available tools.
So I want to say thank you again to all of you. I mean, we really, really appreciate. Obviously, Eric, Gary, I, Ray could not do this without all of the help from all of you. You know, we'd still be back at square one, basically. And so, thank you, really, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. This has been quite a ride as we've been going. It's amazing how far we've come.
Do you have a question? William Edlin?
Yeah, two questions really. The first one would be, is the Google Earth tool that we just saw, is that on the SAR website, or how do you get to it or access it? The second question is, I found 4 graves this weekend that I had been looking for, and I don't have GPS coordinates for it. So I was going to ask, other than using my iPhone and marking the location and reading what the latitude and longitude was, what should we be using if it's not on Find a Grave and you're actually standing in the at the headstone?
Yep, your phone's fine. And if you really trick your phone out when you take the picture, because we'd like a picture of the gravestone too, when you take the picture, the GPS coordinates will be right in the picture. So you don't need to do anything other than that. But you got to turn your location on and turn it on for pictures. And don't ask me how to do that on an iPhone. Sorry, I'm not an iPhone person. But yes, we would like the GPS. Your phone is just fine. You know, it gets you in the vicinity. And then if you've got a wide open cemetery like Eric showed you, if you go on Google Maps and type in those coordinates, you can actually look at the cemetery and go, oh, that wasn't quite right. It's really here, and move it. And then go, oh, those GPS coordinates. Okay.
So
Sure.
on your phone, if you're looking at your pictures, when you review your picture, slide the picture up, and below that will be a map of where you took the picture. You know, if you're taking family pictures, they're usually in your home, of course, but same thing
Okay.
if you're in a cemetery.
I'll take a look at that. And actually, this was it's all related. It's in, one's a Harris Cemetery, one's called Harris Jeter Cemetery, or Harris Jeter Place. And the one is a Patriot that there's just 2 graves there. And the other one at Harris Cemetery has 3 headstones that were placed, you know, back in like 1920. And it says it's inside a 10-foot bordered stone edge. And of course it's not anymore, but it was some graves that I had been told about. So I went looking for them and found them.
So there was a comment made in the chat about Find a Grave has their own app that would record the coordinates as well. The one thing in the experience I give, if you're taking pictures and you're also submitting to Find a Grave, send us the original picture, because if you send it to Find a Grave, they'll strip all the metadata out and we'll lose the GPS coordinates coming from the picture. It looks like Jamie was going to do the same thing I was going to do. So, you know,
you were asking where. So it's these member tools over here. And that's
still in your volunteer section, but over
Okay.
on the left-hand side.
Thank you. And I just did that on my iPhone. I got the headstone that I took a picture of on my iPhone, and I pushed it up, and all it shows me is a different related albums of photos that I've taken. But I'll try to figure out how to get that.
Looks like Walter has a question.
Not a question, but a comment. I've used an app to take pictures of grain shows, and it automatically records the GPS. It's called Timestamp. But if you go into the Apple store and look up the Timestamp, it's a nice app. It puts the GPS coordinates right in the picture. It's a no think kind of situation.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of different ways to get there now, compared to say 10 years ago. Yeah. In that same page for the download of for the Google Earth gives you the link to download the desktop utility that you'd use on a PC to load that into. So it's all there on the same page.
Thank you.
Steve Henson has a hand up.
Yeah, I just have a comment. I don't know that you've ever shown this before, but you have referenced it a couple of times, and that is the Patriot sheet that needs to be filled out each time you find a Patriot with the appropriate information for the cemetery and the GPS readings and that kind of thing that all of us who are involved in grave marking do. You've referred to that a couple of times. It might be good to go in to the forms and pull that up and just show it to everybody. You don't need to do that tonight, but perhaps in the future sometime you could do that. Is that automatic? It's right there. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's on the homepage of the PRS.
Yeah, it sure is. I had forgotten about that.
Not a problem. Yeah.
But when you go out and you do take those pictures, again, you shouldn't go in as a volunteer and start filling that information in and trying to put the pictures in yourself. You should fill out that grave biographies report and send that information in, and it will get put in by someone else. Is that not correct?
Well, I don't think you're going to be able to upload photos anyway, again, without the permissions. So, as basic volunteers, you've got basic capabilities to update Patriot application information. That's what you're being asked to do. And you're not going to be able to do a whole lot outside of that scope without additional permissions being added. So, I wouldn't worry about it too much, but I don't disagree with what you said, Steve. The normal flow, and I think your state would appreciate that as well because they track it. So. That was entertaining.
I fixed it.
Anybody else?
Other questions that we can help with? I know we're going long for some people, but
Gary Green give up GPS for and he said downloaded that and it worked just fine. Android, by the way.
Bob, you're breaking up.
that was a pretty bad connection.
Well, I'll try again. I asked Green how to do a GPS on a Patriot grave, and he said, well, there's an app called it's on an Android. I put it down on the Play Store and it works fine.
Okay, I got a question while we're waiting. I'm looking at the form on another computer I got. Okay, if we find the coordinates, and that's all we want to submit to you, do I need to fill out the whole form and add the coordinates?
I think like the answer to when the question was asked last time is very similar. Don't make this any more difficult than it need be. In other words, that whole form is for, all that information. So if you have, I would say if you've gone out and taken GPS and you know them, feel free to send them to me. That's fine. I'd be happy to enter, if that's all you're doing. You went to a cemetery, you got GPS coordinates for 3 burials, 3 Patriot gravestones or whatever it is. Feel free just to send them to me. That's fine. Much appreciated having the GPS. And we don't need to make a lot of extra work just for the heck of it. There's no value to that.
How do we know how much of the form is already filled out? Do we know that? Can we pull that up?
How much of the form is already filled out? I guess I'm not sure I understand your question. You know, I
Well,
thought you,
if I guess the question, can you identify the Patriot from the PRS? Can you say, hey, I found this person buried. It's, you know, Patriot name, you know, John Smith and P number 12345. And here's his coordinates. If you can tell us that much, that's all we need.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
you don't need to, you know, if his birth date's there and it's already in the form, you don't type it again. It's a waste of your time, you know, and effort. You know, if the death date's there, again, same thing. You know, if it's new information, by all means share. But if it's just reiterating, reconfirming what's already there, you know, I would save yourself the time. You know.
I'm looking at a I'm looking at a note. Someone said, looks like Rich Surface Bay has volunteer permissions. If you have GPS coordinates, why not just edit the Patriot record directly?
Nothing says you can't.
Okay, okay.
You know,
can't-
you could edit it and you could submit it for review, and you know,
Okay,
the people
okay.
responsible for doing the review would see it and push it along. You know.
I didn't think I was that important. Okay,
Yeah, at a Patriot record, you have access to edit the Patriot records. You know.
okay, good.
Yeah, that was Ray that was making the comment. So in the chat. So. Any other questions or things that we can help with? I don't know if I'm seeing anybody at this point.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure. Open forum. So
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, give me a minute to figure out how to ask it right.
Question for Eric, if you've got a moment.
sure.
You were talking earlier about you're getting downloads now from the home office almost daily. Does that include the current record copies and everything? So basically on a weekly basis, you're now getting all the application and record copies for the newest members? Is that what I understand correct?
For the last 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, I have received record copies generally on Friday for the current week.
Wow.
Which to me is absolutely amazing. You know, given where we were when we started this thing and we had, you know, a fraction of the record copies we needed and admittedly no idea how to get the others. So we've come a really, really long ways, you know.
As the state registrar here in Oklahoma, I saw 2 applications that were approved on Friday, and on Saturday, you already had them up online for us to transcribe. I couldn't believe that. We haven't even seen the record copies back here in the state.
Digital moves faster than mail, doesn't it?
It is. It caught me off guard, but yes, we got them transcribed and put up. So we
Well,
try to keep them current.
Well, it caught me, I'll admit, it caught me off guard when I had record copies that were newer than the database entries.
Wow, that's
You know,
amazing. Well,
because-
kudos to everybody that's making that happen. For those of us in the field that use it daily as the registrars and chapters and state registrars, it's fantastic to be able to have that data available to us now. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that Mike Scroggins helped initiate on, on the headquarters side, and it's been tremendous, and I hope it stays that way. There's some other work happening in the background. We do also have people doing digitization of all of the supporting documents that come with those applications. So, all those, proof papers and stuff are now being scanned and stashed away. That is a project that's going to take a long time to complete. But they have somebody dedicated to working that effort. And they're going folder by folder, one by one, scanning them in, and I am getting them made available to me as they come in. They're somewhere in the A's. They're doing it by Patriot name, by Patriot surname. They're not quite halfway through the A's, so they've got a long ways to go.
Just as a comment, I know our friends at the DAR have the record copies and supporting documents available to them, but it takes people with a very high security level or privilege to be able to see those supporting documents. It's not their everyday registrar that gets to do those, but hopefully somewhere down the road, we could determine how that could be available to us also when they become available.
Yep. So I'll admit I have access to them. I think I'm the only one in the PRS committee that has access to them at this point in time. I know Jamie doesn't have access to the raw site, nor does Gary at this point. There's a lot of, for that reason, there's a lot of concern about the privacy of those documents. There's a lot of work to be done, not even just from a technology perspective, but what are the rules around those documents? What can be shared? What can't be shared? The legalities and things like that as you cross, not only the cross states of the US, but, in a multi-country society, where you have international societies, and what are the rules there? We are making the PRS in the background is making those available to the genealogy staff. So we do have the genealogy staff active on here with the ability specifically to access those documents, because they are being digitized and they're eventually going to move off site from headquarters because they're out of space.
I know when I talk to my friends at the DR that can see them, they can't download them or anything else, but they can tell me what set of files to order and pay for to get the document I need to support that application. And if we could ever get to that position that we have something already on our files that we could spend the $20 or whatever it is to get that supporting document would be fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot of work there. To some extent, the only way to get there is to have somebody going through and indexing these things and tell you, and actually say, this particular application, while I had 25 pages, what were those 25 pages? You're either going to share them, which means people are going to see them. And let's face it, if you can see them, people are going to make copies of them, whether they're screen capturing or taking their phone and taking pictures of their screen or whatever else and circumventing whatever protection. I say that because I would do the same thing. So not naive in that regard, but there's 90-something thousand pages already scanned or something like this. So,
wow.
Excuse me. So, I'm not sure how we're going to do the indexing. It's not something I can do. It's going to take a huge lot of volunteer help, but I think there's a lot of uncertainty. How do you broach that, just from a privacy perspective? Plus we got more record copies to go. So we keep focusing there and improving the Patriot records, and so forth.
Hey guys, we're coming up to an hour and a half. Is there any more questions?
Yeah, can I try again, please?
Go for it.
Okay, where there's no ACN, and because we have a lot of we're going through applications now where I guess they're older and they don't have ACNs on them. Where do you get the record number if you have like a supplemental and you want to copy the lineage? data in?
If you switch from ACN, when you're in the editor for the lineage of the one that you want to edit,
right?
Where you would normally say copy from this ACN number, you plug in the
Right.
ACN, that ACN word is a pull down and you could switch over to the word ID.
Yes, but where do you find the ID?
Go on the other one, it would be, if you're editing the other one, it's the prod ID. If you're viewing it, it's just the ID. Still in the upper left-hand corner. So let me go find one. I'll find one of mine here.
And it's on the electronic. It's not on the PDF.
It's not a paper thing. It's
just on the electronic in the upper left. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
I was using the number that shows up when you download the file and it wasn't working.
Yeah. So
the one that automatically fills in.
Yeah. So if you're just viewing it, so if I go look at mine, and then we go to an ACN, this number right there.
Got it.
And so instead of this, use this.
It's so easy. Thank you.
It's easy when they tell you, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you bet. Appreciate it.
No, not a problem.
Okay, Steve Henson.
Yeah, I want to go back to Gary Jensen again. And Gary, I teach new member orientation to all the new members here in Ohio. And I typically take them into the website and very, very quickly show them the PRS. And many are very, very interested in that. They're interested in doing supplementals and that kind of thing. And I'm not in charge of putting this together, but just close your eyes and for a moment, imagine that you can go into the PRS system and you click on descendants and you put in your great, great, great grandmother's name into the descendants. And you can do that today. And it comes up with a list of all of the Patriot ancestors that great, great, great grandma had. And you look at them and you say, gee, their great, great, great grandma has got 2 Patriot ancestors in the system that aren't my Patriot ancestors. I don't have applications or supplementals. And so you take your mouse and you click on great, great grandma and you click on one of those Patriot ancestors and you take your mouse and you go over and you click it on yourself. And on the 4th click, it prints out for you an application with all of the source documents listed. Now, it doesn't give you the source documents. They're going to be issues with those source documents and the privacy issues and those kinds of things. But in my estimation, there's talk about the automated application, and that could be as simple as it gets for an automated application. Again, the source documents would have to be researched. They may be available to the genealogists, and maybe you will or will not have to provide them in detail and pay for them and those kinds of things. But I think if I were to describe my feelings about where I think this whole thing is leading, that kind of sums the whole thing up in terms of doing research for Patriot ancestors. That's it.
So yeah, that topic is definitely a live topic in discussion. Like I said, I sit in the IT project committee as well. So we meet a couple times a week. That application workflow is the next project after the membership database to be addressed. There's a lot of discussion about how do you leverage some of this data to help sponsor new applications, help sponsor supplementals. The beauty of that is if you share some of the generations and you know what the linkages are, and you know that that's proven by certain record copies, you could cite those record copies as the proof, and you don't necessarily need all that source material. Similar to how we cite DAR record copies, for some of our generations, it's really no different. And as long as those applications, meet the the current genealogical standards, i.e. they're not too old, that, some of the really, really early applications, they just sort of said, yeah, I'm the grandson, because I said so. And that was pretty much it. That doesn't fly today. But yeah, there's a lot of looking into how do you leverage this kind of data, going forward. Some of that is sort of the impetus for, for the things I talked early on about, tree structures that Jamie and I are looking at, because you need to be able to understand the tree flow and have these interconnected to be able to find the patriots that you might not have known you actually were connected to. Because
So if I
your
understand that-
because your cousin did it, not yourself, or vice versa. So that's kind of a
so
goal.
If I was to go back to the descendants page, is that first and last name, or last name and first name, or how do you put that search in?
Right now, for me, it's a contains search. So if that string is in the name, then it matches. My suggestion is sometimes less is more. Don't search by first and last name. Pick the last name or pick part of the last name. If you get too many hits, expand it a little bit, to narrow the search.
Well, you filter it on year, Gary.
And you could also filter year. There's up to plus minus 10, on
Okay.
the year. So you can narrow within a couple decades, of time,
Yeah.
either on birth or death.
Jim Engler here, and to amplify on what Eric just mentioned as an example of less is more. I searched on my great grandfather. I have my application, my son's applications. Surprisingly enough, the middle name is spelled slightly differently in a couple of the different places. If you typed in the full thing, you wouldn't get all of them. You can't type in just the first name and the last name because it's got the middle name in there too. So typing in the last name and then searching from there is probably an easier way to do it. It'd be great if we could get to a point where the names are separated out, but that's not how the data structure is set up at this point in time.
Right. And that's why we're going to look to split that up, where you're going to see the generational thing. Instead of having just a name, you're going to get name components, just like you do for the Patriots, so that you could have the ability to separate the search of the first name versus the last name and things like that. So we could do a more full featured search.
Okay, guys, we're at an hour and a half. Looks
Yep,
like Gary Green has dropped off of us. Jamie, do you have any final comments?
I do not. I said thank you all for attending, and please, if you have questions you weren't comfortable asking here or think about later or whatever, just drop me an email. Between Eric and I and Gary and Ray, I'm sure we can figure something out for you. So thank you for spending the time with us. Hopefully it was helpful.
Thank you, Eric. Any last words?
No, that I second that. I put an email in the chat in case for people who might not have had my email. Yeah, there's 2 K's in the middle of that, so don't be surprised. It's a funny spelling name. But if you have questions, ask. That's what we're here for. I'm grateful for the volunteers and all the work that you guys do to make this useful, because yeah, I write the system, I wrote the system and all that kind of stuff, but I'll admit it would suck to write a system that nobody uses. So I greatly appreciate.
Well, gentlemen, on behalf of Gary Green, I want to thank you for participating today, and Eric and Jamie, I want to thank you both for your talent and the time that you spent discussing this with everyone. Okay.
Yeah.
I will try to get this uploaded into the share file. I've been recording this, and hopefully it all recorded well. I did not have any blips with my electricity for once, so hopefully we got a good recording. Okay, gentlemen, thank you all for staying. Yes.